Hello. Okay, welcome to this session. This is going to be really informal, and I have some recipes that women have asked me about that I am happy to answer, and I intend to answer any questions. But really, this is going to be pretty informal. This may or may not go for a full hour. I know that usually um, my sessions do go for a full hour, at least for these webinars. Um, that may or may not happen today, and that's okay. So, um, we just may not have, I usually feel like I need to have stuff to discuss for that hour, and I don't feel like I do. So, I will answer the questions. I'm just trying to get information up here so that I can make sure that any questions get answered. So, as folks are coming in, and I am live on YouTube, so if you ever have, if you're ever listening, if you want to listen to the podcast so you get ahead of them or a hold of them before Monday morning, they actually go live on YouTube. I record live on YouTube. So you're more than welcome to find those podcasts there. And then, of course, you can always interact with me for these live sessions by watching on YouTube. Go to YouTube, subscribe. It should notify you when I go live. And then there is a question and answer area in YouTube. So anybody watching on YouTube is more than welcome to put any questions in that comment section and I will get to those. And then if you're watching on the replay, again, put questions in the comment section and I'm happy um, to answer those because I'll get flagged for them. Okay, so Shar asks about a strawberry deliciousness. Strawberry pretzel salad. Now that sounds fascinating. I think that sounds fabulous, actually. Um, so when I look at the ingredient list, so there are a few things that you're going to want to strategize with this. One, you're going to want to, again, type 2 diabetes is always associated or caused by the foods that we're eating, causing us to have too much insulin in our system. So when we realize that, high carb foods and really highly processed foods create a lot of insulin in our body. And when we have too much insulin, the cells become insulin resistant and then our blood sugars climb high. That is how that works. When we realize that that is the chain, the food, high insulin, cell dysfunction, high blood sugars. What we realize we have to do is fix the food. The food is the cause of the high blood sugars, and not because it's got lots of sugar in it, although that is part of it, but because of how it negatively impacts and changes our insulin function at a cellular level. So we have to figure out which one of these foods, which one of these ingredients and recipes are causing this component of cellular misfunction. That's the solution that we're looking for when we're looking to improve or to see better blood sugars to improve our health. And this is, and anybody who's worked with me knows, like, this is not just improving your blood sugars. Insulin resistance is at the core of everything from liver disease and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Insulin resistance is at the core of that. But polycystic ovarian syndrome, insulin is at the core of that. Dementia, insulin resistance is at the core of that. Hypertension, insulin resistance is a major player in that. Cholesterol issues or dyslipidemia, insulin resistance is at the core of that. So fixing this food component, anybody who works with me, they know that it's not just the diabetes, it's all these other things, but they also know that I very much just the phrasing in my brain is this food just does not match our biology. It's not right. It's not wrong. It just doesn't match our biology. And figuring out which of those foods and which of the ingredients in our recipes is really what we have to do. And that's what I want to talk about today. So Char's recipe, 2 cups of crushed pretzels, 3/4 cup of butter that's melted, 3 tablespoons of sugar. The filling has 2 cups of whipped topping, 1 package of cream cheese softened, and then 1 cup of sugar in the filling. So I'm not sure ingredients and then filling and then topping. There's also topping. So the ingredients, it gives us the crushed pretzels, the butter, the tablespoon of sugar, and then the filling has the whipped topping and the cream cheese and sugar. And then, of course, the topping has 2 packages of gelatin, of strawberry gelatin, 2 cups of boiling water for the gelatin, um, 2 packages of frozen, sweetened, sliced, and thawed strawberries, and then an additional whipped topping for the with the pretzels. Okay, so sounds like there are a number of things going on. You want to preheat the oven, combine the pretzel, the butter, and the sugar, press into an ungreased baking dish, bake that for 10 minutes, cool in a wire rack. For the filling in a small bowl, you beat the whipped topping, cream cheese, and sugar until smooth, and then spread over that pretzel crust. You refrigerate it until it's chilled. For the topping, you dissolve the gelatin in the boiling water in a large bowl. And then you add the strawberries until partially set, carefully spooning over the filling, and then you chill it all for 4 to 6 hours. And you cut into squares, and it sounds delicious. I'm not gonna lie. I really want to get a picture of this so that I can share the picture, but it's just a video. It doesn't give me a picture. So okay, so when we start looking at this recipe, the pretzels are going to I mean, it's carbohydrates. It's going to be any carbohydrate, I don't care if it's salty pretzels or potatoes or straight sugar or Oreos or whatever, or any of the carbohydrates, they break down into glucose into your bloodstream. And that glucose is what triggers that high insulin response. So pretzels are flour, straight flour. That's what I mean, it's got some salt too, but primarily it's flour. So that's going to break down into sugar. That is definitely going to have a huge insulin surge. Clearly, sugar is going to have a huge insulin surge. And then the strawberry gelatin, that would be the other thing. Even if it's the like sugar-free gelatin, it's still going to give you an insulin surge, or it has the possibility to give you an insulin surge. And I think that if you're already insulin resistant with either prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, you just need to assume that the artificial sweeteners are also going to give you an insulin surge, and probably just need to break up with them as you're healing your body. So those are the things in this, and that's kind of how I do it. When I'm looking at a recipe, I will look at the ingredients that are going to be problematic. Like the pretzels, clearly going to be a problem. Sugar, clearly going to be a problem. Strawberries, or the strawberry gelatin is going to be an issue. What may surprise you, what's not going to be an issue? The butter, the whipped topping, not necessarily an issue. Making sure that you're not getting any sweetener in it, but you can make your own whipped topping with heavy whipping cream, and it doesn't have any sugar in it. And it's sweet and good and amazing. The cream cheese, probably not an issue. The strawberries, nobody got diabetic because of their strawberry problem. These are probably not the issues. So how I would adjust this is I would make it without the crust. I would not do a substitute. Lots of women will be like, well, can I use almond flour? Can I use almonds? I guess you could. That is one thing you could probably do with this, was take like pecans and walnuts and almonds and maybe some other nuts and crush them. Like, don't pulverize them, but crush them to where they're crunchy. They probably will not set up the same way the pretzels would, but it would give you a crunch at the bottom, and then the melted butter and press it at the bottom. That actually would probably work out really well in this. And then do the whipped cream and then the cream cheese. And then instead of the cup of sugar, there's a couple of things you can do. One, you can use honey, you can use maple syrup. There's still going to be tons of carbs in that. That's still going to be a problem. But what you may be able to do with the whipped cream and the cream cheese, the softened cream cheese, that you're gonna, you whip them together, if I remember the recipe correctly, and filling in a small bowl, beat and whip the cream cheese until smooth, beat the whipped topping and the cream cheese until smooth. I would just add some strawberries to that. Whether you actually cook the strawberries and warm them, when you do that, they actually release more of their sugars, and they're sweeter that way. I mean, I wouldn't do it with all of the strawberries, but doing it with maybe a half cup or a cup of strawberries might be a way to, and then mix it in with this whipped topping and the cream cheese. Okay. I would do that. That's how I would adjust this recipe primarily. I would not on the topping, I would not use the strawberry gelatin. Again, I would use I mean, the frozen strawberries are going to be nice because they're going to actually probably be a little softer, but you could also use like the frozen in combination, like half frozen and half um fresh strawberries. And what I would just do is put those together. Again, do you do some maybe like a full food processor pulse to kind of get them in a smoother, like more finely cut up? Maybe I would do that. I would not use the strawberry gelatin. And then again, top with the whipped cream. And then instead of the pretzels, I would use nuts to top. So those are the big adjustments that I would make to this recipe. I think this recipe sounds really tasty. Now I'm interested in making it. Um, but those are the adjustments I would make. If I were going to use sugar, and this is true, and again, I'm like looking around, like my children are downstairs. They're not, they're at school. And I know they don't watch my YouTube channel. Please don't let them watch my YouTube channel because I'm going to share a secret. The fact of the matter is, when I am making food, like tasty treats, snacky things for my kids, chocolate chip cookies, I always use half the sugar. When it calls for a cup of sugar, I use a half of a cup, and they never know the difference. They think they're amazing. When it asks for 2 cups of chocolate chips, I use about a cup of chocolate chips. They never complain. They never know the difference, and they think it's amazing. So I always, every recipe, and it's not that the recipe makers, I'm choosing to believe the recipe makers aren't out there trying to make us sick, but they just want it to taste good so people will love their recipe. And you know what human beings love? They love the shit out of sugar, and they will eat it in everything from cookies to ketchup. Everything will have sugar in it because the human being loves the way it tastes. There's things that happen in our brain. There's neurochemistry that occurs in our brain when our tongue gets a hold of sugar. And I've shared this before in these, but I think it's important for anybody who hasn't heard this. Understand that the power of sugar is so potent that for newborn babies, that is actually our analgesia, our pain management of choice for any painful procedure we as physicians or we as medical providers are going to do to a newborn baby. An IV start, circumcisions on little boys, on baby boys, are done utilizing glucose solution on their tongue as their pain management because it stimulates the same receptors in our brain that other pain managements like morphine stimulate or trigger. So recognize the power of sugar. Our tongues, this chemical reaction that happens when sugar lands on our tongue and what happens in our brain is very, very powerful. So don't underestimate why people who are trying to make food that people like, that other humans like, why they put sugar in everything is because on a neurochemical, on a biological level, the human being is drawn to this. And some people know that. Some people just want to make people like their food, and that's fine. So, that recipe actually sounds really good, and now I'm interested in trying it. That is the strawberry recipe. The other recipe that I got was from Diana on Instagram. She has a meatloaf recipe. And now I will tell you, I should probably have led this off with my culinary skills are tragic at best and dangerous at worst. I've set a lot of kitchens on fire. It was never something I was interested in learning when I was a kid. And so I didn't really learn how to cook. It was just not where I wanted to spend my time. Um, but I definitely have had to learn to cook. So I've gained some skills. I'm not quite as dangerous as I used to be. But if anything, you're like, I don't know that that would work. You should probably err on the side that maybe that wouldn't work and we need to make some adjustments. Or like this recipe about meatloaf that I'm going to share with you. Like I've made meatloaf a handful of times and I think I understand like everything that's required in meatloaf. I know that usually there are breadcrumbs or some kind of pulverized filling, like pulverized oh, I don't even know why it's in there, to be real honest. I don't know why it's in there. I know that you usually use breadcrumbs. Um, I know some people have used oats, and I personally, I just like that texture. Some people will not. I personally like that texture. So any kind of wholer, like more whole grain, again, whether it's oats, maybe crushed almonds, I don't know, like any kind of more whole food versus pulverized anything is always going to be better, whether it be pulverized, um, flour, like wheat that's, crushed up, that's pulverized, that's flour. Even oat flour, I would not love, but whole oats, I kind of think that I would like that texture and it makes sense to use that. And I know that there are other recipes out there that use that. They don't, I mean, they're not making it. There are recipes built they're not just making adjustments to the recipes. There are recipes built for that use oats. I know that that's out there, so maybe it's not so crazy, but in case it sounds disgusting to anybody, I understand that that may not have the right texture that you're looking for. Um, but so Diana had figured out how to kind of adjust the recipe with the breadcrumbs and those sorts of things. Outside of that, meatloaf is pretty awesome. It's meat and, my mom always put onions. Whenever I've made it, I would have put in the past, I just put a ton of veggies in there. So I'll do green peppers, red peppers, onions. I just think those should go on everything. Pizza, omelets, I don't care what, meatloaf. I think that combination of vegetables go well together. I also think mushrooms go well on everything. So like finely chopping mushrooms and putting it into a meatloaf, I think would be really savory and amazing and a way to get kind of this variety of vegetables into your diet. I think that would be brilliant. So those are things that, any veggies that go in there, I think is brilliant. Meat, it's not causing your diabetes. Is it perfect? Is that a perfect food? Should you only be eating meat? No, I'm not saying that, but it's definitely not causing you to make too much insulin and make worse blood sugars. So most of what goes into meatloaf is amazing. Her question was, what about the stuff that goes, what about the topping? Again, my domestic skills are tragic. So ketchup was always the topping that I would think of. Um, and I know that some people make it and everything from maple syrup or brown sugar in it. There's all sorts of things that you can put into it. Um, Her question specifically was kind of about the maples or the sugar component in the ketchup. So my recommendation was to just try it without it. And that is, again, like kind of how I'm always like, cut the sugar in half because almost always there's too much of it. If there is just a tablespoon or 3 tablespoons of sugar or even flour in a recipe, try making the recipe without it. Certainly cut it in half. But even I would get really ambitious and try making the recipe without it. It may change the way it sets up. It may change the texture. All of that is great and grand. That's fine. We can find some ways to work around that. But I would just give it a try without it. As far as the topping for a meatloaf, same thing. I would give it a try without it, like without the sugar. So make the topping without the sweetener in it, see how it goes. If you're tasting it and it doesn't taste great, finding ways to sweeten it that do not involve sugars. So that means fruit, right? Like, do you take a tablespoon of applesauce and put a tablespoon of applesauce in place of that, in that dressing, in that, not dressing, in that sauce? Do you take a tablespoon of applesauce in place of the whatever sweetener they had in it? Maybe. Do you take and maybe like again use a food processor and pulverize like a few orange slices and add that? Maybe there's going to be a citrusy taste with that. Absolutely. I don't know that that would be a horrible thing. Other things that I'll add to make things sweet, raisins and dates, either again pulverized in a food processor or just finely chopped. Those are some things that I add just to give it sweetness. And it's like you don't even need to add a half a cup. Literally, like a tablespoon of raisins to an entire recipe gives that sweetness that sometimes really is adding a little something to our sauces, to our recipes. It doesn't need to be a cup of sugar, but maybe just a tablespoon of something sweet is what is really going to be required to make that food taste good. I like raisins. I know raisins are not everybody's jam. Not everybody loves them. I think they're amazing, and I think we should put them in everything, and not everybody does, and that's fine. But sometimes just a touch will be helpful. Eve asks about Jovial brand einkorn flour. I heard that it's not as processed as others. Any other questions? Make sure you put them in the question and answer, or even in the chat. Sometimes I don't have the settings right and the chat doesn't work, but I'm going to pull it up. I'm happy to answer any questions. If you know of a recipe and just want to throw the link inside the chat box, you can. If you want to come on and have a conversation, definitely, that's fine also. So, the flour, there are flours out there that are less processed. I am not familiar. I have heard of this type of flour, this einkorn flour. I've heard of it. I have not looked into it. Flour processing in the United States, at least, is, we best of intentions, but really has gone awry. So everything about American flour is just not fabulous. It's high gluten content. It's got vitamins added to it, which are so toxic in the concentrated form that like the people like the millers have to wear hazmat suits to do that work, to add the fortification to our flour. And so you have this, again, like maybe in very small quantities, it's not toxic. I mean, everything's toxic in the right quantity. The sun burns if you get too much. I get that. But I don't know. I'm like, I don't know that I need vitamins added to my flour. They did this because, of course, back, in their, industrial revolution in the 1800s and early 1900s, there was so much scurvy and, all of these diseases of malnourishment, of lack of vitamin, these vitamin deficiencies, that the government was like, oh, everybody eats flour. Let's put all the vitamins in the flour. So I understand the rationale behind it. I don't feel like it's necessary anymore. I feel like, and I mean, like in general, we should be getting our vitamins from fruits and vegetables, not from bread. But yeah, and then in addition to that situation, like my understanding is because the government was trying to provide vitamins to reverse deficiencies in human beings and our citizens, they made it a law that all flour has to have it in it. So any milled flour in America will have these vitamins in it that, again, at some level are very toxic to humans, such that they have to wear hazmat suits to use them. I'm like, I don't know that I want to be eating that. So the flour in America, what it comes down to, Eve, is the flour in America is pretty rough. And I know you and I have talked about this. I would love to find a flour that's less processed, but because of the laws in America, I don't know that I would ever have access to this. I don't know if this einkorn flour is from another country and you can order it online. I have ordered some foods from England that I couldn't get a hold of in the States, and the magic of modern age, they shipped it to me. So it was kind of funny, but anyway, that's I don't know about that flower specifically, Eve. I can look into it though, and we can talk about it the next time you and I chat. So, let me see. There is another, I'm going to check YouTube. Again, any questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat, or if you have a recipe you want me to go through, put it in the chat. I'm happy to answer anything. I'm going to check the YouTube and make sure there's no questions or comments in there. And then there is one. Kat, you said, could you sprinkle nuts on top and spread? Yes, I absolutely agree. Maybe you posted that really early on, but that is definitely kind of the my, like, as I was working through that recipe, I think using crushed pecans, crushed walnuts, crushed almonds, if you like cashews, in the end, cashews aren't horrible, macadamia, whatever. I think crushing nuts and using them again as like a crust, anything crunchy you're looking for, I think it's a brilliant way to do it. In this particular strawberry recipe that we went through, with the butter in it, it makes it can form a little crust. And if you're okay having it spooned versus it setting up in this, perfect way, that, serves well. I honestly think that recipe is amazing. I'm totally going to make that. It sounds delicious. But yeah, definitely those are the adjustments that I would make. 3-hour course on olive oil. Oh yes, Eve, I know. Anything but yes, extra virgin, yes, olive oil, even organic, it's processed using chemicals. Absolutely. There is this reality with olive oil. Olive oil should be pressed. And in fact, you should definitely look at it. I don't know, Eve, did they say anything about is pressing, like, can we rely on the idea of pressing um of like the pressed olive oil. Is that like real? Yes, cold pressed. Okay, good. That's always what I look for. Whenever I get olive oil, I look for cold pressed. There's a lot of mixed, like interesting information out there about olive oil being horrible, and like not that olive oil really is horrible, but the manufacturers do things to it, to stretch it, and that it's not really what we think it is, and that it's horrible. So, I'm waiting for that to kind of to see how that all lands out. But I definitely I buy the big gallon of olive oil, and it's expensive. It's like an investment every time. I probably do it a few times a year, maybe 3 or 4 times a year. Um, it's one of those things that I'm like, oh, we're buying olive oil this time. Okay, that's gonna definitely impact my grocery bill because it is significantly more expensive. Kat, you have a question about the better blood sugars. 2 tablespoons of dressings on salads. So yes, what kind of dressing? So any dressing is usually fine as long as it has less than 3 tablespoons of carbs per serving and usually it's 2 servings, or 2 tablespoons is a serving. So really, I just look for the stuff that has less than 3 grams of carbs. Salad dressing is sketch at best. I mean, it's really, they do a lot of stuff. They put a lot of chemistry in it. There's a lot of oils in them that aren't great. There's guar guns, there's xanthan gums. Some of them have carrageenan, that's a carcinogen. I mean, there's like a lot of like, salad dressings are not fabulous. So if you can find one that you like, I like the Primal Kitchen brand. They are stupid expensive though. So it's not something, a lot of times I make my own dressing. So, but what the 2 tablespoons of salad dressing in the 14-day guide is really, you should be looking for on the back of it. It should have 3 gram, like per serving, 3 grams of carbs or less. There's probably a lot of other stuff in there that is not fabulous. And if you ever want to, not have that, that's fine too. But in my brain, I'm like 2 tablespoons of, carrageenan at that point. Is that really the end of the world? I don't know that it is. But understand that salad dressings are they're filled with a lot of things. They're trying to pack a lot of flavor, so they have to do a lot of food chemistry into a couple tablespoons. So things like of course, Thousand Island dressing was my favorite because I think it's like super loaded in carbs. So those kinds of things are kind of off the table for salads. Um, I make my own salad dressings, or I try to make sure that enough things in my salad have flavor that I don't need to rely so heavily on the salad dressing to provide the flavor. So I make sure that my meat is cooked in a way that it has the most flavor. I'll make sure that there's a variety of veggies, red peppers and green peppers, red and yellow peppers and green peppers, because there's just a different flavor with those different colors of peppers. Shredded carrots I like. I make sure to have some nuts on there. I will sometimes use raisins. I'm still waiting to find out what horribleness exists in raisins because they're really, really good. Like they're a little too good, so I kind of am skeptical of them. Be careful with cranberries. Cranberries always have sugar added to them. I've searched hell and high water looking for some cranberries that do not have sugar or artificial sugar added to them. I've yet to be able to find them. I guess if I'm going to add cranberries, I'm going to have to actually do cranberries myself, which I'm just not at a place where I want cranberries in my life that much. But I am skeptical when I see cranberries in something because there's always sugar. I've never been able to find any that don't have sugar. Adding some fruits, berries, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, again, something with some powerful flavor. I like pears in my salad. They're amazing in salads. Adding, again, like, is it a whole pear? No, that's a ton of carbs. Maybe it's a quarter of a pear. Maybe it's a half of a pear. Maybe it's, 15 blueberries. The berries, honestly, are probably a free for all. The grapes, the pears, the apples, those sorts of things can have higher carbs. So you kind of have to maybe add a quarter instead of a whole fruit to it. But again, I'm very, very confident that you did not get diabetes because of your apple problem or your pear problem. So I don't want you to avoid those foods. So that's what I do so that I don't need to use a ton of dressing. The other thing that I've done on dressings that I really, really like is I mix salsa with sour cream. And I use that on like a taco salad. That's my dressing on a taco salad. So if I make like a chicken Waldorf salad, or if I'm eating tuna salad, I'll have that on the veggies, and I'll just have the meat, the salad, the tuna or the chicken salad component, and I use that as dressing. So those are some options for dressing. But yes, as your question for the blood sugar guide, what are 2 tablespoons of dressing? Anything with 3 grams. I don't know. I would probably actually shoot for less than 2 grams, but I think 3 grams is probably reasonable. And again, you have to count those grams of carbohydrates. So you've got to decide, is this dressing so important to me that I want to count 2 or 3 grams of carbohydrates in my carbohydrate allowance for today? So, cold press, yes. Hold on, but important to have a location where the oh, okay. They mix oils. Yeah, they mix oils from a lot of places. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Kind of like coffee. They say that we should be doing that also, looking for single source coffee. Um, I'm not horribly great about that, but yes, I know that there is some subtleties to our olive oil choices. So, all right, if there are any other questions, Kat, let me know in the chat on YouTube if I answered everything, or if you have anything else there. There's another one on Instagram. Let me get to. Oh, I thought somebody had it on Instagram. Maybe it's on somewhere else. Or maybe I misread the technology. That's also real. I'm gonna try to make sure it's not on Facebook instead. I just want to make sure. It was the meatloaf. I think it was the meatloaf recipes that Diana was sending to me. So. All right. I think that's what I have. I don't know that I've got anything else, unless you guys have any questions. All right. Going once, going twice, third time gone. All right, guys. I appreciate you showing up. I always appreciate when us as women take a moment for our health. I was on a podcast, and it dropped this week. That it's from a woman, and it's called Fire Up at 55 Plus. And her whole mission is to help women who are raised in the area of being in the time frame, in the era of being people pleasers, and putting others before them, and that are ready to like start putting themselves first and living their life, this gift that we have of life. And so I appreciated, it was a privilege to be on our podcast, and I appreciated that time and that message that, a lot of what I believe is that, every day is a gift. And that, at what time do we want to start to take that gift by the horns and start to, take care of ourselves? And I really see coming here and, coming to these webinars, listening to even my podcast or any podcast, taking a few minutes of your day to dedicate and commit to taking care of you. I just think that's so important. So I appreciate everybody for showing up, and group mindset about the importance of this. One last, Kat says, you did, thank you. I did find a dressing recipe off heavy whipping cream. Kat, if you want me to look at that recipe and you put it in the chat, I will. If not, if like you can't find it or want me to, if we sign off here and I don't look at what you want me to look at, you send me a message, Delane at DelaneMD, and I'll get it looked at, okay? My email, delane@delanemd.com. I'm always happy to answer anything. All right, guys, that is what I've got. I am off for a wonderful race. I do these group runs. It's called a Ragnar trail race with heavy whipping cream and vinegar. I think that sounds amazing, Kat, especially, yes, heavy whipping cream and vinegar. If you've got a dressing recipe, 1, I'd love for you to share it. And 2, it sounds amazing. That sounds perfect. Yes, I'll be off doing a race though. It's a relay race. Me and 7 of my girlfriends are camping and running all weekend. So I am off right now. This is the last thing I'll be doing. So if anybody ever has any questions, put it in the comments. send me a message, Delane@DelaneMD.com. I'm happy to answer anything. If you haven't already joined the Facebook group, go and join there. You can always ask questions there. Great group of ladies in that Facebook group that are happy to help. And then anything that you need of me, I'm in and out of there, but tag me and I will do my best to get it answered. And if I don't, you just tag me again. All right. Thanks so much for